guys, so I am back again and I just want to do a quick video on 5 things that can help you really be successful in the respiratory therapy program. So number 1, it's kind of 2 things combined. It is one of the biggest things I see people struggle with: time management and scheduling. So what that means is that when you're in the respiratory therapy program, it's a very time-consuming course, especially if you have a family outside of school, you're working, anything of the sort. It is so busy and time-consuming that you really need to make sure that you have your priorities straight and everything organized. And it can become really difficult also if you have friends or family that are wanting to go out all the time or do all of these things, and you're sitting there like, oh, I've got 3 or 4 tests to study for. So you really need to be able to correctly prioritize your time, as well as keep a regular study schedule, because if you do have a good regular study schedule, you won't feel as guilty going out to do something with friends or family as you would if maybe you wait till the last second to study for everything. And that kind of goes along with the scheduling things as well. If you do decide to go do something the night before a test, you have to be prepared that if you have not adequately studied, that you're probably going to have a lower grade. It's really about correctly prioritizing your time, setting a study schedule, and sticking to it. And something else that goes along with that, with setting a schedule and using your time efficiently, is finding a study method that works for you, because you can study for 6 hours inefficiently and learn just as much or retain just as much as if you find an efficient way to study for you, which is going to be different for everyone, of course. And if you have an efficient way to study, that may only take you 2 or 3 hours as opposed to 6. Another thing I hear a lot of people talk about, they'll talk about maybe having a really hard time in a course, or they feel like they don't know exactly what they're doing, but they're not using all of the resources available to them. So my second tip is going to be use all of your resources, whether that is tutoring from instructors at your school, asking a classmate that maybe understands the subject better than you do to explain it to you and help you kind of walk through whatever the concept is, so that you can also understand it. That even goes to things like using your local library to find various textbooks. If you don't have money to go out and buy a bunch of supplemental books, which many of us don't as a student, an amazing resource is your local library. You're going to be able to find textbooks and journals and scholarly articles, anything of this sort. So those resources are there for you and they're free. Use them. And the third tip, this goes for both in school and while you're on clinical: be eager to participate, because when you're there, whether you're at school or on clinical, these are people that you're possibly or potentially going to be working with in the future. So you need to be eager to participate, and the more eager you are to do things, the more opportunities you're going to get to learn and experience things that maybe you wouldn't have been offered if you're very nonchalant about everything. So if someone asks you to help them, even if you've done it a million times, do it again. Do it 1,012 times. It doesn't matter. And another thing about that also is the more you do something, the more comfortable you're going to get with it. And if you have a new person showing you how to do something, maybe the way they do it is easier than what you've been doing this whole time. You never know unless you let someone teach you. So again, attitude is everything. So that's going to be the tip. When you are on clinical, not just being eager to learn, but don't sit there and play on your phone the whole time. Don't talk about how bad you want to go home, how tired you are, how long of a day it's been. Although you might be feeling all of those things, do you really want to be conveying that to your preceptor, who could be speaking to the respiratory director of that hospital and saying, man, they were just talking about wanting to go home all the time, so I just told them to, leave early? You don't want to convey those things, even if you are tired, because we're all tired, we're studying, we've got a million things to do, and it's very mentally and physically exhausting to be in clinical most of the time. And I'm sure that your preceptor is just as tired, especially if it's their 4th day on of 12-hour shifts. So again, it kind of is similar to the be eager to learn and to do things, but you need to keep your attitude in mind at all times. And that's the same thing that goes along with when you're in class. Because if you're in class and you're just constantly negative, I don't want to be here, this is stupid, why am I learning this? This has nothing to do with respiratory therapy. These are all the wrong way to think about things. If you're being taught something in your class or your instructor is going over something, it's because they think it is important. Whether it's directly related to something immediately in the respiratory therapy field, or perhaps it's a foundation of something that you can build off later so that once you start getting into deeper subjects and more complicated subjects, you can go back and think, oh man, I remember in chemistry we were talking about, you know, the gas laws and this relates to this and that and this. So it's really all about your frame of mind, because if you sit there and you're negative and just kind of feeling really down about everything all the time, it's gonna make everything else so miserable. And it is hard sometimes to get out of that mindset, especially if you're having a really rough week, but we have to try the hardest that we can to keep a good attitude, because it's going to make your life easier, it's going to make your program easier, and it's going to make you more receptive to learning. And number 5, probably one of the more important things, it's not related directly to school or clinicals, but you have to find an outlet. Because again, the program is very stressful. So when you are doing your scheduling and prioritizing, make sure you prioritize yourself. Because if we are too stressed out, too tired, we're not going to be functioning at our best, which means we're not going to perform our best on clinical. We are not going to readily absorb information as when we're well rested or not stressed out. So you need to make sure to listen to your body. And I know that this is easier said than done, especially if you're in the middle of finals and clinicals and you've got a million things going on and you're exhausted. You're sitting there thinking, oh, I just really want a nap right now, but oh my God, I've got 12 subjects to study or 15 chapters, anything of the sort. But what I found, even if you just, if you're exhausted because you only slept a few hours the night before, taking a quick 20-minute nap is going to help you be more productive with that extra rest than you would be if you're running off of 3 hours of sleep and refusing to sleep because you don't think you have the time. Because then you're just going to be staring at your book, having to read the same thing 20 times, or whatever your study method is, because you're so exhausted your brain can't concentrate adequately to actually absorb and, understand the material you're trying to study. So you do have to set time aside for yourself, but make sure that you don't overdo it, because if you take a whole week off of studying, you're probably going to be pretty lost, and that might, affect your grades going down. Obviously, grades aren't everything, but you have to get a certain grade to pass your course. So that's the biggest thing. You want to make sure not only that you are getting the grades to move on in the program, but you also want to make sure you're understanding things. Because although not everyone is really good at learning book-wise, or maybe they're a poor test taker, which happens, some people get test anxiety, and then they go out to clinical and they just blow everybody away because they're so amazing in the clinical realm. It's like everything is second nature to them, and that's perfectly fine, but you have to make sure that you can get the grades you need to get far enough to go to clinical, to show people that you do know what you're doing and that maybe you do just have test anxiety, and that's perfectly fine. But to do that, again, you can't stress yourself out to the point of sabotaging yourself. So make some time for yourself, even if it's just an hour nap or an hour of doing something you enjoy. For example, I like making videos for you guys. So even though it's still kind of respiratory therapy related, because I'm talking about respiratory therapy, it helps me kind of put all of my thoughts in order and relax, and it gives me a few minutes away from my books and notes and materials. But basically, these are just a few tips of things to do to be successful in the respiratory therapy program overall, they're kind of like my top 5 things. If there's anything that you guys want to suggest down below that really helped you go through the program, or something that you noticed made a huge difference for you as you advance through the program, to kind of help and share with our other viewers here, definitely leave a comment down below. And if you guys have questions, always feel free to follow me on Instagram. It's just breatheeasy_SRT. And I will see you guys next time.